Good afternoon, everybody. I think we have enough of the scheduled participants with us to go ahead and get started. My name is Amy Jackson. I know several of you, I'm monitoring the chat, I know several of you, but not all of you. So I just want to say welcome to this session and let you know a little bit about me before we get started. I am a longtime CTE educator from Clarksville, Tennessee. I taught AV production for 18 years in Clarksville, Montgomery County schools at a Title I high school. And I have been with the TDOE, the Mid-Cumberland Core office since late last year. I also did 3 years with a national nonprofit called T&TP between my classroom time and joining the Department of Education here in the state of Tennessee. I'm super excited to have everybody joining us for today's session, which is called Learning from the Past to Make Equity a Priority. And having a session right after lunchtime is always interesting, especially in the virtual environment. So I'm going to do everything in my power to keep folks engaged, and I hope you will get a lot out of this session. Before we get started, I want to just make a few announcements, some norms, starting with the first bullet, our room host, Taffy Bishop. And I'm going to pause there and let Taffy introduce herself to everybody before we move on. Taffy?
Hi, my name is Taffy Bishop. I'm the Southeast CTE Core Consultant. I spent about 17 years in the classroom. I taught for about 5 years in Meigs County, Tennessee, which was a very rural one-county high school. I spent some time at ETC in the collegiate world, and then 9 years in the inner city in Chattanooga. And I've been the CTE Core Consultant in the Southeast for the past 4 years. So I look forward to helping Amy navigate the tech issues and being your voice on the chat today. So I'm gonna stop my video, and Amy, back to you.
All right, thanks so much. And so Taffy helped me out on a session I did yesterday, and her help was invaluable as we navigate all the fun of a virtual CTE Institute. So continuing on with our norms, we do ask that everyone engages using the chat feature that's in the Institute platform itself. And I know it's kind of tricky. It may be helpful for you to have like the Zoom part, the presentation part on one side, and your Institute platform on the other side, so you can both chat and keep up with what's going on your screen. I know as a participant myself, the first day that took me some getting used to. Now, we are going to try something, even though you're going to engage through the chat feature. If you ever want to ask a question or share something verbally with the whole group, we are going to try our very best to try this out and see if it's going to be possible for you to raise your hand on the Zoom side and then wait to be called upon and unmuted. We're going to test this out actually before we go any further. A former colleague of mine, Lauren Beck, I believe you're on the call, and Lauren is raising her hand, and we are going to, Taffy, see if you can manage to unmute Lauren.
Lauren, you should be unmuted.
Hey, Amy. Hey, Taffy.
All right. Okay, so this is great,
Lauren.
Woohoo! Thank you so much, Lauren. So that said, I was really excited that this might work, because as much as I love sharing with you guys, I want to hear what you have to say in response. And the chat is a great feature, and certainly it's great for everyone to be able to participate. But if you do have something that you're willing to share verbally, or you want to ask a question instead of just typing it, there will be this ability. You could go to the Zoom side, find the raise hand icon, and then Taffy will be able to unmute you and call on you to share. So really excited about that. A couple other norms. Files for this session are accessible in the Institute platform. They're in the upper right corner beside the chat. There is a PDF there that you will be needing to access later on in this session. And if for any reason you can't, Taffy will be able to share a link to that file. And then last but not least, guys, I think we all have to be comfortable with the potential for tech issues or delays or whatever. Just knowing that it's nobody's fault. It's just the world we are living in at this time. All right, so 3 objectives for our short time together. 1, I'm hoping that by the end of the session, you'll understand a brief history of vocational education, examine some challenges to equity in CTE, and identify areas to improve equity at your own local level. Those are our 3 objectives for this session. So right now, I want everybody to share in the chat. We're hopping in a time machine and we're going back to the days when we were in high school, not teaching high school, but you're in high school. What were some CTE, or they might have been called vocational or VOTEC or shop classes, depending on how old you are. If you're old like me, they were called VOTEC. What were some of those classes in your school? Did you take such a class? If yes, share. And if you didn't, what was your perception of the students who took CTE classes and the teachers who taught them? So a lot to put in the chat there. Thinking back, what were a few of those classes? Did you take a class? If yes, what was it? And if no, what did you think about those students and teachers in CTE courses? I'm going to mute myself and we're going to start monitoring the chat for some sharing.
Amy, we have lots of home economics. I too was a home economics FHA back in the day, state officer. Auto shop, wood shop, typing, cosmetology, drafting, keyboarding, lots of auto shops, ags. Some people did not take any CTE classes, but see how they are beneficial. Lots of home ec, some keyboarding.
This is awesome. And if anyone is willing and wants to share their experiences from the high school days, feel free to raise your hand and Taffy will call on you and unmute you if you want to share out some of additional thoughts.
I mean, I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand.
All right, well, we'll move on then. I will say I like Taffy, I took home ec back in the day, and I wasn't a state level officer, but I was an FHA school level officer. And I will just share personally that even though I was taking one of those classes, I waited until my senior year to take it. And I'll be honest, my perception was that this was gonna be an easy, fun class that I wanted to take because I just wanted to cook, quite honestly, and eat at school. And that was my personal perception. And I realized that a lot of my classmates in that home ec class my senior year were students that I ordinarily did not engage with, or they didn't share any other classes with me except for that one specific class. All right, well, there are some stigmas surrounding vocational education. And I think to understand why CTE, which previously was known as vocational or voc ed, is still sometimes viewed unfavorably, it's helpful to understand a little history. So, and forgive me if you knew this already, I was a pretty good student back in the day, but I'm relatively certain I never learned this in any history class. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, we had two great thinkers and people of influence in the African American community, Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. And although they were both giants and very influential, they were very much at odds over how to ensure civil rights and a prosperous future for African Americans. Washington viewed vocational training as the way to lift people out of poverty, equipping them with hands-on skills so that they could make a good living and eventually, earn the respect, so to speak, of the decision makers. Du Bois argued that African Americans needed to set their sights on something he called the talented 10th, and for that talented 10th to gain access to universities in order to become leaders of greater influence. Now, what I did know about Washington is he founded the Tuskegee Institute. What I did not know about Du Bois is he was the first ever African American to obtain a doctorate from Harvard. So these two were very much at odds. They had the same end game for African Americans, but very different approaches as to how to achieve that, with Washington thinking that equipping people with hands-on skills and being able to earn a living was the key, and Du Bois arguing that higher education, university education, was the way. I'm just interested in the chat if you would type in who you think historians recognize as the winner of this debate. Was it Washington or Du Bois? Put your best guess into the chat. And I'll rely on Taffy to monitor for me.
Amy, while I'm monitoring the chat, I just want to go back and recognize a few comments that people have called. Several people have said that, you know, it was the vocational school. And so we talk about CTE now, but it even as when I was in school, and I too graduated in '93, I saw someone put that on there. We too called them shop classes. And so we've had a sort of a change in name, and Amy will address that later on in the session. But the perception was, and this has been addressed in some of the comments a couple back, that, you know, that was for the kids that were not going to college. That was sort of the perception. So I just wanted to recognize that before we get into who won this debate. I don't know if I'm frozen or what, but I am not seeing any comments about who won the great debate.
Oh, well, spoiler alert then. I'll go ahead, and historians, and there've been a lot, I did a lot of research on this. This was totally new to me until I did a book study a few years ago at my previous employer, and I was really fascinated by it. And history views Du Bois as the winner of the debate, that ensuring that African Americans had access to higher education would be the critical key in establishing the future of civil rights for all. But, you know, I would say that the stigma around vocational education or shop classes, you're right, we had a voc ed center when I was growing up. It was not just about, and is still not currently just about race, because I think all of us might say that blue collar work has historically been looked down upon by many in the upper class. So we're looking at some of these stigmas that are rooted in historical inequities. Way back as far as 1917, the very first law that authorized federal funding for vocational education in American schools, the Smith-Hughes Act, described vocational education specifically as preparation for careers that did not require a bachelor's degree. And, you know, if you're my age or any older, I think we know that vocational classes historically were, like as folks are mentioning in the chat, used for tracking non-college bound students, and that went on for many, many years. Even today, we've made great strides in the perception game, but I think there are still many people who argue that trade school or a tech school or a certification being a viable path to the American dream. Those who argue that, you know, it's just as good as a four-year university path, sometimes we're still met with criticism. I've experienced that firsthand with my own children, where one wanted to go to college and one definitely, she took cosmetology in high school and is currently a manager at a local high-end spa. And people, it really is frustrating when people want to look down on her decision and just because it was different than what historically people think of as that key to success. And as we said, yes, finally in 2006, the terms vocational education or VOTEC or SHOP were pretty much out the window, although there's still some people who hold on to that terminology. But we generally replace that with career and technical education, or CTE, with the redesign and the rebranding focusing on us preparing students not only for the world of work, but for all post-secondary options as well, to include, if they want it, that four-year traditional college experience. So what I want to do now is I want everybody to think of a quick example from your own experience of how CTE is still struggling with some of those historical stigmas or poor perceptions. I want you to put that in the chat, and if you're willing to share verbally, raise your hand and we'll call on some folks to share as well if you're tired of just hearing me speak. So I'm going to pause for a moment, let everybody put into the chat a personal example, something you've seen firsthand of how CTE may still be struggling with those historical stigmas or poor perceptions.
Feel free to raise your hand and I will unmute you if you would like to talk. Melissa,
Hey, you guys.
Barnett.
Okay, so Taffy, you are recognizing Melissa. We've got 4 participants raising their hand, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But we're going to
Melissa,
start
you
with
should
Melissa.
be unmuted.
Hello.
Hello, Melissa, we can hear you.
Okay. An example, I was on a plane flying to California. My seatmate was a writer for the state paper. And she was on the way to the same conference which I was, which was International DECA. And it comes across during the conversation that yes, her child was participating there and taking marketing classes. But when I was talking about VocEd or CTE, she had no idea that was a part of vocational education or CTE. So it's not a clear perception in the public.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think I hear birds in the background. Sounds lovely wherever you are, Melissa.
It is. I'm outside.
Great. Taffy, would you recognize someone else?
Yeah. Helen, would you like to, you should be unmuted.
Hello.
Hello, Helen.
Hi. The struggle that we still continue to have is we have a large population of special education students, but we also have those students who are taking AP classes, those gifted students who want to come to the Career and Technology Center, but they leave it in the counselor's hands. And once they find out that the counselor does not have that total say-so, they allow those students who are gifted to come to the center, like those students who know that they want to do something in the medical field and they hear about our health science program, they end up kind of just going against the counselor through the process of having their parents to come up there and all of that, because they still have stigma of what type of students should be coming to the CTE.
That is such a marvelous point that you made there. And Taffy, I believe we're probably only going to have time for maybe one more to share before we need to move on to keep us on track. So I'll let you pick one more person. And my apologies if not everybody gets to share, but keep raising those hands throughout the session.
Karen Pitts, you should be unmuted now.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Good deal. Well, my point is very similar to some of the others that you've heard. I think it really does come down to our counselors and educating our counselors about what our programs are about. But I think probably, you know, we do not promote our programs as well as we should. So, you know, in this day and age, I think we have to do a better job of that. We have to be more proactive in marketing and promoting our programs and helping others outside of the school district, people in business and industry, people at the post-secondary level understand. I think in a lot of school districts that follow the academies models, I think that has started to kind of turn the tide for them. But a lot of this is, and there's been a lot of discussion in the chat about home ec and what it is, and I won't get into that, but it's one of those things that we need for everyone to understand what career and technical education is today and the benefits of career and technical education, whether you want to go and get some type of certification, or you want to go to a 2-year community college or a TCAT or a 4-year university. But as school districts, we must do a better job of educating students on those options and what they can gain out of those options. And if you all are not, if there's anyone watching this that's not seeing success in the new economy, Google it, watch it, share that information with your students. Our economy is not driven by people who have bachelor's and master's degrees. And we've got to do a better job of educating our students on where the jobs are.
Karen, thank you so much. Such valid points. And if you are so inclined, if you would just make sure you share the name of that in the chat for folks that may want to see that.
Amy, I'll just jump in. Karen has already shared that,
Okay,
and just echo a few other points that Karen, there's lots of comments, great comments in the chat. Thank you so much for engaging in that. But what Karen talked about as far as marketing your programs, so there's a lot of comments in the chat. So market that to counselors, parents, and even other teachers, just educating parents, teachers, students, counselors, everyone on really what your program is and about, and that it's not a track system, but really is a program for students that have the abilities, aptitudes, and interest in doing that particular work.
Fabulous. And again, Taffy, I'm so thankful that you are tracking the chat for me, because I just have it on my tiny little iPhone and I don't have multiple screens in front of me. So thank you. All right, we will be moving on. So as I said, even though, you know, we rebranded, call it CTE, have a new mission of making sure students are equipped for a variety of paths, there are still CTE programs and institutional educations in general that really struggle when it comes to equity. And this is really due to a variety of factors. And I think perhaps it begins with just defining what we mean by equity. So I want everybody to take a moment in the chat and tell me what equity in CTE, what does it mean to you? What does equity in CTE mean to you? And if we have time, I'm trying to monitor time. I'm not sure we'll have time for a hand raise and share on this, but if we could put into the chat what equity means to you.
Amy, those are starting to come in. Fairness, access to all classes, all students, all levels. Everyone has access, receiving the same respect as academic classes, same benefits, consequences, success for everyone. So
Thank you. Awesome. And I'm really excited. I did learn yesterday at my session I could copy all of the chat comments and put them into a Word doc so I would have them historically to look back on. Thanks, everybody. If you've ever participated in any kind of equity training or equality training in a PD, you might have seen this graphic in the past when we talk about trying to define what equity is versus equality. So on the left here, we see equality. Everybody is given the same thing. That's equality. On the right in this illustration is equity. Every person getting what he or she needs to be successful. And while I think this is a great illustration, I really do, and I've seen it in some other trainings, I think it's a good illustration. I really think I like this one better. So I'm going to toggle back and forth between these two, and I want you to think for a moment, what's the difference in these illustrations of defining equity? So we have equity on the right here, and here's a different illustration of equity. I want you to think about what's the difference. What is the illustrator trying to make a point about here? And instead of everybody chatting this, if anyone's brave enough to just raise a hand and share what they think the key difference might be between what you're seeing on the right on this screen versus what you're seeing in this illustration. We got some hands raised. Taffy, would you please call on somebody?
James, you should be unmuted. James Johnson? James, are you unmuted? Well, James,
not hearing James. You want to try?
let's do Michael Lamb. Michael, can you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
The second picture to me seems to point out the fact that not everyone starts on equal ground.
Thank you, absolutely. So I think that's such a good point. In this illustration, everybody's on equal ground. It's the people that are different sizes. And here, the people are all equal, all of equal worth, but the playing field they're on is very different. Some people don't need as much because they start on higher ground. So I like this particular illustration just because, to me, it makes the point that it's not the person who has shortcomings, it's the environment in which we all live that impacts what people need. Because historically, we know due to a variety of factors, whether it's race, socioeconomic, so many different things that put people at a different spot on the playing field. So thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate your willingness to participate there. And I would even like to point out that in our own state Perkins 5 plan, equity is really at the center of it. Page 40 of the state Perkins plan specifically calls this out, in that we need to provide more intensive support for those students who are historically underserved or marginalized, such as individuals with disabilities, individuals from economically disadvantaged families, those living in distressed or at-risk areas, formerly incarcerated individuals, and homeless individuals. Equity is a very big priority in Perkins 5. So I want us to think about next, as we talk about equity, even if we can define what equity is in CTE, there are challenges to equity. There was a national report released last year by an organization called MDRC. The report is Practitioner Perspectives on Equity in Career and Technical Education, and it surveyed CTE practitioners nationwide to ask them, what are the biggest challenges to us being able to hit equity in CTE? And according to this report, the 7 big things were advising, which is where the counselor piece comes in, right? And we already talked about maybe it's the counselors not knowing. The second biggest challenge these practitioners identified was information flow. How do we get the information to all the target audiences that need to know about our programs? The third one we've already spent some time talking about in the stigma, the history of tracking and so forth. The fourth big one was enrollment criteria, because there are programs that have certain like GPA or attendance requirements that go with them. Number 5 was soft skills. And I think we would all argue that most of our students, no matter their background or what other factors are in their lives, a lot of our students definitely need improvement with those soft skills. A 6th challenge identified was social networks, which was one I hadn't really thought about before, but I really should have, having taught for 18 years at a Title I school. If a student doesn't have a strong social network, if they've never seen someone be successful in a career field to which they aspire, it's harder for them to make connections. And then number 7 in this report was employer preparedness. Employers' inability maybe to connect with the teenagers that we are hoping that they will work with. So as you're looking at these 7 challenges to equity identified in this report from peers nationwide, I want you to type in the chat which one of these 7 challenges is biggest in your classroom or your school or your district, and or which one of these are you most interested in learning more about? Is it advising, information flow, stigma, enrollment criteria, soft skills, social networks, or employer preparedness? Go ahead and type that into the chat right now, please.
Amy, I'm seeing a lot of advising, some stigma. Stigma and advising are by far coming out on top. Information flow, Vicki says. Social
Awesome.
networks.
And that was the point. This is a choose your own adventure part of our session, guys. So what we're going to do for the next, we're going to give it the next 6 minutes. We're going to take 6 minutes, and here's what we're going to do. I'm going to be very explicit in my instructions here. You're going to access the report I just mentioned, Practitioner Perspectives at Equity in Career and Technical Education. It's in the files for the session as a PDE. On a PDF on the Institute side. Taffy will also put a link in the chat in case you have trouble. So first, you're going to access the report. Then I want you to read not the whole report, just the section that examines the challenge you've just identified in the chat as wanting to learn more about, as well as the possible solutions the authors offer. Then, as you're reading, think about this through the lens of your classroom or your school or your district. And then when we come back together in 6 minutes, I'd like folks to be prepared to share your thoughts with the group. So I'm going to set a timer for 6 minutes. This is 6 minutes of independent work starting now. I'm going to put myself on mute. If you have any questions, though, please feel free to chat them, and Taffy will try to address them. Okay, everybody, about 1 minute left and we'll be coming back together full group. Anyone who's interested in sharing verbally can go ahead and start raising hands. 1 minute till we come back full group. All right, as we're starting to come back together, whole group, and we will be calling on some folks who are willing to share. I want to address a couple of things in the chat that came up and very valid. So Michael says, how do we address the pushback we receive about equity when equality is so embedded in our culture, like the founding documents, all men are created equal, etc. Yes, it says all men are created equal, but what hasn't been equal, and I do believe that, but what isn't equal are the systems that keep some people on lower ground, quite frankly. And I know it's really difficult. These are hard things to think about. We're not going to come up with all the solutions in a 45-minute virtual session for sure. But I think about it like this. Equality would be giving everybody glasses, but not everybody might not need, maybe you don't need the glasses. Maybe you're fine without the glasses. I need the glasses to see, but you may not. Where equity is giving people what they need to be successful. But those are some very wonderful points coming through in the comments, and I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate the encouraging feedback. Thank you very much. This is an issue that is extremely close to my heart. I also saw some comments about this being a challenge for folks who work with people who've been incarcerated. My own brother just got out of prison, actual prison, not just jail, prison 3 weeks ago. And I am so thankful he was able to find an employer who would give him another shot. I saw at least one hand raised, and I want to do some sharing. So again, you read just a little bit of this report, focusing on the section that you wanted to learn more about. I would love to hear now some thoughts from anyone who is willing to share a quick summary of the challenge you read about, the proposed solutions, and any thoughts you had about how it could impact you locally as you read. Saw at least one hand up. We'll take others. Anybody?
Megan should be unmuted.
Yeah, I'm here. Hey, I really liked what the article said about stigma, and that I was thinking of it from a student's perspective, that some of our students have a stigma about what it is, but that article talked about how one school system addressed the parent stigma. I hadn't thought about it from that regard, because I am the same age as a lot of the parents of students that I have. And I think about how I grew up, and unconsciously, yeah, I think there was a stigma attached to it. But I think, and given the district that I work in, I'm in Williamson County, which is very diverse, but very affluent. And my school in particular is the most diverse in the whole county. So we have students from all walks of life. And I think that getting some of those super professional, high earning parents to understand that not every kid is going to go to a 4-year college, but even if they do, if they know what they want to do, we have classes available to get you started on that. Our school has an amazing architecture program and drafting and things like that. And I keep saying, I wish I had had that opportunity when I was in school, because then I would have gone into engineering. And so I think just talking to those parents and saying, yeah, your kid can still go to a 4-year college if they want to, great, but we can give them a head start by giving them the training now. And that goes so far.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, and make sure you tell Dr. Qualls down in Williamson County hi for me, please. Taffy, can we call on someone else?
Yes, Amy. Mealy Sharp should be unmuted.
Yes. Hi. I actually I work currently in the prison system, And so the stigma is attached to that. And it's hard for my ladies to see themselves as being successful, but they need to be, because a lot of them are single parents and they need to have a skill that's going to allow them to earn enough money to support themselves.
Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your service. I know it's not easy working in that system. Kathy, do we have someone else?
Yes, James Johnson should be unmuted. Well, I'm having trouble unmuting. He should be unmuted now. James? James, can you hear us? You should be unmuted. He maybe
James,
had a problem.
yeah,
I
we're so
thought
sorry.
someone
We're having,
else.
yeah, tech issues
Yeah.
with James. So sorry.
Sorry, James. Is there anyone else? I thought I saw someone else raise their hand, but then maybe they took it down. I mean, that's all I
Okay.
see right now.
Yeah, we're tight on time anyway. Thank you so much for those of you, and thanks for bearing with us as we found this. We just discovered it today that we could actually pull this off and unmute some folks. So I was excited because I got tired of hearing just my own voice. So thank you all for sharing. Ooh, I am just getting happy with the advancing of slides. So as we wind down, I want us all to think about possible next steps, because as I said, this was a quick session, and it's hard to think about some of these concepts, equality and equity, and just where CTE fits into all of it. The learning shouldn't stop here. I suggest these as possible next steps. One, you could ask your CTE director to share findings from the Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment, or CLNA. It's a big report that all CTE directors had to do, digging into the data that would shine a light on some possible inequities in your local district. Once you educate yourself on those inequities that exist, maybe you could even start leading some of the difficult conversations about possible solutions, referencing the report that we looked at briefly or other resources. I would encourage you also to continue to seek out additional professional development and training on equity, as I believe it's vitally important, always has been, but I feel like in this day and age, even more so. And last, I would ask you to challenge your own bias about the types of students who can truly be successful in your program. Just go back to thinking of that graphic. Not all of our students are on the same level playing field, but I do believe they were all created equally and can be successful with enough assistance from us. I know your hearts are in the right place because you're educators, and I thank you so very much for everything you do, have done, and will do in an especially challenging year that's likely to be at least partially virtual for you. As we wrap up today, revisiting our objectives, I'd like you to put in just a yes or no final chat. Did we meet our objectives today? Understanding a brief history of vocational ed, examining challenges to equity and CTE, and identifying some areas to improve equity at the local level. A quick yes or no, and then I will share the keyword, which I'm sure many people are eager to get to.
Amy, overwhelmingly people said yes. Best session of the day, or best session of the conference so far was one comment, a few. So great job, Amy, as always.
Taffy, I could not have done it without you, and I could not have done it without our wonderful participants. We have 106 folks on this call, and that's awesome. This session is also going to be in PDF file format in the files of the platform, the Institute platform, if you want to reference it. Also, there's my email on the screen. If anyone ever wants to stay in touch with me, feel free. And our keyword for the session is cheer. The keyword for our session is cheer. Happy if you could put that in the chat in case anybody misses it. That way they'll have it to take the survey at the end.
I will put that in the chat right now, Amy.
Awesome. This platform will kick us off automatically in 10 minutes. I will hang around, but that concludes our session. Thank you all so much, and my very best to all of you for the upcoming school year.
Amy, are you ready to end? I see people are leaving, no more chat.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and end it. Thank you, Taffy. I
Okay.
seriously could not have done it without you. You are an awesome, awesome room host.
You're the best, Amy.
If we have to do this virtual stuff anymore, I want you on my side, please.
Same here.
Okay, bye.
Partner
Thanks.
with. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.